Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
He picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week, but until then, as always, go Chiefs.
We've got another live edition of the Intangibles on the Arrowhead Addict Network. My name is Carter, and I am joined by my good friend, as always, it's Christian Ainsworth. Christian, how are you today on this wonderful Monday?
Doing really good, man. That JuJu signing really, gave me some energy.
Let me tell you, the dopamine, it's flowing lately. I've got approximately 100 fantasy football drafts this week. I'm already in one that's going right now. Our Arrowhead Addict members fantasy league has been going on for a long time now because we've been drafting over the course of a couple of days since we've got time zone differences. We've got Florida State choking after spending all off season talking about how they should have been the college football championship and how they should be out of the ACC. They choke in Dublin to Georgia Tech, which was glorious. We've got the Chiefs making signings. There's so much happening. It's a great time, and I'm repping my Royals gear. Crucial doubleheader going on right now. The chat needs to keep me updated on the score. Last time I saw it was 3-2. Doubleheader in Cleveland. It's a great time to be a Chiefs fan. It's a great time to be in Kansas City, and it's a great time to listen to the Intangibles.
Yeah, you're damn right, dude. What a hell of a game that Florida State game was, dude. I was watching that, and I thought from the very beginning they had a drive early.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, that set the tone. There's no way in hell they're coming back. And then tight game all the way till the end.
Well, I tell you what, the Georgia Tech, I can't remember his name. The Georgia Tech quarterback, though, Moxie.
Yeah, dude.
Gritty, classic gritty performance. Loved it. Lunch pail type of guy. All the stereotypes. It was great, though. And just delicious watching them get upset. There was also a pretty good SMU. Nevada was pretty good last night, or that night too. Some really great play calls there at the end of that game. But anyways, enough about college football week 0. We'll be talking about college football week 1 this week with some prospects to watch. We're going to do a prospect watch list, and we're also going to talk a little bit about some of our NFL predictions. But first, we've got Chiefs breaking news to break down here, Christian. The Chiefs, it was announced this morning, news was broke that the Chiefs are bringing back 2022 Super Bowl champion JuJu Smith-Schuster. He's back with the Chiefs. Your instant reaction, Christian?
My immediate reaction was kind of pissed off because I'm like, dude, Justin Ross has to make the roster. Nico Remigio seemed like a lock. And now all these wide receivers that we thought might have at least somewhat high upside are going to get 0 reps and probably won't make the roster. But as I thought about it more and more, I was kind of thinking, okay, Rice suspension, probably not going to happen. But if it does, JuJu's a, player that can kind of fit that role. We have kind of this really low floor. I mean, we've raised the floor of our wide receiver room coming into the season, but the floor was so low last season that you're kind of just raising that up maybe a tick or two. And then, maybe he can provide you with something down the stretch, or if a player gets injured or something, it's kind of just a win-win, right?
Is there any player who upgraded their situation more in the last couple of days than JuJu Smith-Schuster, going from Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi, the Bill O'Brien, Bill Belichick offense to going to Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, a team that's looking to three-peat with an offense that already has Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice? I mean, here's the thing, and a lot of people have already complained about this. Oh, this is just the Chiefs bringing back a guy that they were familiar with. They're being sentimental. This just speaks to the lack of depth. You are asking so much less of what the Patriots were asking of JuJu Smith-Schuster last year and what the Chiefs asked of him last time he was here. He does not need to be wide receiver 1, 2, or 3, or even 4, really. He needs to be wide receiver 5 or 6 and provide insurance in case Rashee Rice is suspended. This raises the floor of the wide receiver room. I don't really think it raises the ceiling. it is low risk. The Patriot, as Jalen says here, I agree with him in the chat. It is low risk because it costs the Chiefs basically the league minimum, and you are just like I said, you are raising the floor. We love Nico Remigio, we love Justin Ross because we've hardly seen them fail, or they've never failed at the NFL level. We love the idea of them, but we don't love them scoring touchdowns and almost having 1,000-yard wide receivers and being crucial to the Chiefs' game-scoring or game-winning field goal drive to win the Super Bowl. All things JuJu Smith-Schuster has done recently. Yes, his knee might look like lasagna. I'm not entirely sure. And yeah, his better days are probably behind him at this point. But he's instantly the best run-blocking wide receiver the Chiefs have on the roster. I tweeted out this morning, he played about 50% in the slot, 50% out wide. So there's your X. I'm pretty pleased with this. Who do you think is the odd man out here? Is it Nico Remigio? Is it Justin Ross? Is it Sky Moore? Is it Kadarius Toney? Is it all the above? How many of those guys do you think may make it out of the fringe wide receiver guys?
So let's just bank on them having 7. And we talked about this on the last podcast, who we really thought were going to be those top 7. I think 4 are undisputed. They're going to be there. Rice, Worthy, Brown, and then McCole Hardman or Justin Watson, depending on how you feel about them. Then you have, again, Watson or McCole Hardman for number 5. You have, we're going to assume Sky Moore because I'm pretty sure he's a roster lock. And then it's JuJu. Who do you like better? JuJu, Kadarius Toney, Nico Remigio, or Justin Ross? I think the question or the answer there is like really, really easy, right?
Yeah. Again, I'll take the guy who like almost had 1,000 yards in Kansas City 2 years ago and has been an actual NFL wide receiver for many seasons and is a seasoned vet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think there's a situation that if Hollywood Brown wasn't injured, they might even only keep 6 instead of 7. Maybe Sky Moore, and like who knows? Maybe right now the Chiefs are working the phones, seeing what kind of just like conditional day 3 pick they can get for Sky Moore or Kadarius Toney or Justin Ross. I know that we do this thing all the time. Like, well, who would trade for them? We're talking pennies on the dollar here, but it's better than just outright cutting them, right? Like Kadarius Toney, if he's on the roster or not on the roster this year, he costs the Chiefs the same amount of money. So they might as well try to work the phones and see what they can get out of that. So it will be very interesting to see how it breaks down. I assume that JuJu Smith-Schuster is going to be an active squad player, like he's going to make the 53. That's how I would view it. There's a chance maybe that he was added to the practice squad, but I personally don't think that that's...
No way in hell. No way in hell he gets to get put on the practice squad and makes no impact. I don't think we're going to see like 1,000 yards, obviously.
Oh, no.
I don't think we'll see 700. But like 300 or 400?
Yeah, that's
reasonable expectation.
Like 200-300 yards, role player, guy that can just move the sticks on a critical down, depth for an injury, run blocking, veteran leadership, all that stuff. And also, I think the nice thing about the Chiefs wide receiver room right now is you've got several guys who can do several of the same things, right? You have Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, McCole Hardman, all can stretch the field vertically and horizontally. Hollywood Brown's definitely the most accomplished like route runner of those guys, but they all have some similar traits. Then you've got guys who can run in the slot, be a power slot over the middle of the field. You've got Kelsey, Rice, JuJu, who can all do those things. Then you've kind of got some like fill in the gaps, do it all type of guys with, I'm not going to say do it all well with Sky Moore, but do it all Justin Watson, Sky Moore. So there's lots of roles there. And I think that helps because my fear about the wide receiver room has always been what happens if Rashee Rice is suspended and the 165-pound wide receiver gets hurt. Pick your choice, Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy, because those are very likely things to happen. It's literally already happened. But this raises the floor. And yeah, I think it's great. And keep in mind too, like if your Twitter handle is Nico season or Ross season or Ross offensive rookie of the year season, you don't have to change your Twitter handle because there's a chance one of those guys might make it onto the practice squad still. So it'll be interesting to see. Tomorrow you can tune in to the Arrowhead Addict podcast. We'll have Sterling and Joshua Briscoe on here talking as the roster cutdowns happen. Speaking of roster cutdowns, just a few minutes ago, there was one that was fairly significant. Looks like Sam McDowell tweeted out the Chiefs have cut cornerback Kelvin Joseph. He was a guy that was, has made several roster predictions. Several people thought he might factor into that corner room. Looks like he is not going to be here. I'm not sure what I think about this. I think maybe the Chiefs are going to roll with some of their draft picks over a veteran like him. Like maybe this means Nick Jones makes it. I'd still be shocked if Kamal Haddon makes it. Obviously, we know the guys that are going to be there. That's McDuffie, Watson, Williams, Johnson, and Shamari Connor if you label him as a corner. So kind of interesting to see how that room will break down.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. I mean, the cornerback room has always somehow been like, even though we've invested so little into it as far as like high level draft picks, it's always been kind of like the backbone of the Spags defense. I know that we spent, there was a season that we were the most expensive defensive line in the league because we had Frank Clark, Okafor, Chris Jones, all these players on it, but they were never really like the strong suit of the defense, right? It was always Tyrann Mathieu. It was always L'Jarius Sneed. It was always Trent McDuffie. It seems like the depth there has kind of gone down, especially in this past preseason. We talked a whole lot, and this kind of goes into our next subject that we're going to talk about really well. Like the preseason success, does that really mean anything? When you're getting blown out and it's like third stringers versus third stringers, I really think that means that your depth is lacking. And we see like the lack of technique with some of these more raw prospects. I think that there's probably going to be a move that gets made to kind of round off that DB roster. I know there are a lot of guys that a lot of people love. I don't think Reed's position is going to be, in flux as to whether or not he's going to be a major contributor. But, we have a good safety room. Quarterbacks are still a little lacking. I just don't know. Kelvin Joseph was never like a raise the floor type of player for me. He was always just kind of insurance of like, at least we have somebody competent back there that can do stuff. But I don't know. Do you see him making a move? Because that's like where my mind is leading me towards something like that happening.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I still wonder about Keith Taylor. He's a guy who like was on the playoff roster and contributed on special teams in playoff games. So he's a guy that has run with the first team some. So maybe they chose Keith Taylor over Kelvin Joseph, but I thought it was going to be one or the other. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Someone made a comment here in the chat. Everett Mann said, "Who do you think really wanted JuJu to come back?" From a tweet that came from Jason Anderson of Sports Radio 810, he said Matt Nagy was actually the guy who was really pounding the table for him. And yeah, I'm sure Patrick Mahomes isn't upset or Andy Reid, but it sounded like Matt Nagy was the guy who was really pounding the table for him. So that's a good sign. I think, looking ahead, this is like 100% speculation, but also an educated guess. I think Matt Nagy's role in this team is going to grow, not shrink. So it's kind of nice to see like his name be on a certain move. Be interesting to see how that goes going on. I continue to think, does this preseason success or lack of it matter? I'm not sure. It's one thing for the team to have no wins in preseason. We know that these games don't matter, but what is the historical value of the success long term? Like, do Super Bowl teams, do they have preseason success? You spoke to the depth. That's definitely a part of it. Now, I will also say, keep in mind, some of the teams that they played in the preseason, they didn't play their starters at all. They lost to the Lions, and there was no Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jared Goff in that game. Those were their backups. Now, were those games won or lost on the backs of starters? I'm not sure. It's kind of interesting to see. What do you think? Do you think that there's any, and I get it, we're talking just minuscule, but do you think there's any reason for concern about the lack of preseason success and the fact that they are winless?
Well, I don't know if there's any validity to the argument that, those wins or those losses, were like, we can lay them at the feet of the starting players. Like, Andy Reid likes to play during the preseason. He always does some weird stuff with the offense, and the defense is still kind of getting their legs under them as well. But again, I really do think it speaks to the lack of depth. And you really, really get to see that when your first round defensive end from last year is not beating the second or third string offensive tackles. Or, hey, maybe that cornerback that you got in the 6th round, Kamal Hadden, maybe he isn't exactly the player you thought he was going to be coming out of Clemson. And those are little things, and I don't think it'll matter to the overall team success. But I think when you think of the Chiefs, you think of a team with a lot of depth. You think of them with a lot of, at least defensively now, they've kind of changed the perception here over the past year, but like really competent, really established players that can, even if they're young, and when I say established, I don't necessarily mean experienced, but players who have come in, shown that they can be consistent. I don't think that we see that a lot. Are you at a party right now, dude? I see the strobes going off on your screen.
Yeah, Richard was talking about that a little bit too. I think it's because I'm switching tabs. That's why I'm
Oh, okay, I got
I'm
you.
calculating numbers. I'm doing research here.
Well, I knew it was a good take. I didn't think you need to throw a party or anything. But no, yeah, like it's got to be depth, right? That's the main thing that it indicates.
Yeah, I do think that there's a depth element to it, and yeah, I think that it's lacking a little bit. You look at some of the spots. This is a spot that the team is significantly not as good last year as they were the year prior. The year prior, you had Nick Bolton, Willie Gay, Leo Chanel, and then you bring in Drew Tranquil as depth, and then Jack Cochran, who's a linebacker that saw a lot more snaps in the preseason. That's a guy that they're going to be relying on. Same with the safety room. They were able to bring in Mike Edwards and have that as depth. Nick Allegretti, another great depth player that they used to have. And some of those guys are gone. Obviously, the edge room's kind of mostly the same. Dana is back. Charles Omenihu played in the preseason last year. He didn't this year. So I do think that is probably a part of the story. It's just the lack of depth. Let's look at this. All right. So I polled the last 5 Super Bowls, the teams that played in those Super Bowls and their preseason record. Let's see if there's any correlation here. All right. So the 2023 Chiefs were 2-1 in the preseason. The 49ers 1-2. The 2022 Chiefs were 2-1. The Eagles were 1-2. The 2021 team from Cincinnati that will remain nameless with a fraudulent Super Bowl 1-2. Then the Rams that year were 0-3. 2020 there was no preseason because of the pandemic. 2019 1-3 the Chiefs were. The 49ers were 3-1. So those are the numbers. There's only one team that's done it who was 0-3, which I think kind of matters a little bit. It's the 2021 Rams, which that team was another team that didn't have a ton of depth, right? That was a Stars and Jags type of team. Jags is short for just another guy, in case you didn't know. I think that's kind of like the Chiefs' path. Now, the Rams, they won the Super Bowl. They weren't going for a three-peat like the Chiefs are, but I mean, maybe there's some correlation there with the depth.
Well, okay, so I think that those Rams were another team that was really famous for not playing the starters. You remember Sean McVay was really on the cutting edge of like, we're not playing our starters in preseason. We're not risking it at all. That would explain the 0-3. But again, that's all depth. I think you're right. I think that the depth is like, hey, if you're a good enough team to, have a good enough team to go to the Super Bowl and win it, you have at least some depth. I'm not saying that it's impossible for the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl. Clearly, it's possible if you go 0-3 in the preseason, but there's got to be something. It has to be worth something. It can't be just a, nothing burger.
To your point, when Patrick Mahomes walked off the field, it's a little bit tough with like saying starters because some of the starters played later into the game than others. And starters is kind of a loose term, right? There's probably about like 30 guys that factor into the starting offense and defense. But when Patrick Mahomes walked off the preseason field this season, he led 3-0 versus the Jaguars and 6-0 versus the Lions. So if that makes you feel a little bit better, ultimately, we know that this season is barely going to be defined by the regular season. I think like when I've listened to almost any national coverage of the Chiefs this year, they're just like, the regular season doesn't even matter. Like they can just turn it up for the postseason. So preseason, we're probably just nervous Chiefs fans who are too worried about this, but it's kind of interesting to talk about. And if this team does struggle, here's the only thing that I think could matter about the preseason. If the Chiefs are one of those teams that gets ravaged by injuries, which they have been very good at managing historically, then if their depth is bad, then yeah, I do think that this could matter. That's the only way. But that's also like, hey, if the Ravens lose Lamar Jackson or if the Bengals lose Joe Burrow, they might not be that good. And it's like, well, yeah, almost every team is bad when they lose their best players. So that's the only way that I think it matters.
Yeah, I would agree.
Speaking of the postseason, it is, we are in this little holding pattern before the NFL season begins. We wanted to fire off some NFL takes. A long time ago, Christian and I used to have a podcast together where we talked Chiefs and general NFL. So we're going to just fire off our season predictions here. We're not going to go through every single team and their record, but we're going to kind of go through the divisions real quick, talk about our predictions and share them. That way we can revisit them for when I am right and Christian is wrong, and I can take my victory lap.
All right.
So we're going to go through these here real quick. We're going to put them up on here on the screen as well so you guys can see them. So first off, looks like we're going to start with my predictions. And AFC or NFC? What should we start with, Christian?
Oh, AFC. AFC all day.
Okay. So I've got the AFC North here. I have it going like this: Bengals, Ravens, Browns, Steelers. I have the Bengals and the Ravens both making the playoffs as well. My thoughts here: I think that the Ravens are still a very good team. I thought that last year was really their season. They have had a ton of turnover. They're replacing like 4 starters along the offensive line. It's like 3 or 4 starters along the offensive line. They've lost their head coach, or not their head coach. They've lost their defensive coordinator, who was excellent. I think the guy who's stepping in will probably do a good job. They've also lost quite a bit of talent. That offense, it's added Derrick Henry. To me, that they've always been the best running offense in the NFL. So them adding Derrick Henry, or are they just going to be won by even more now? I'm not sure. I do think that Lamar Jackson took a nice step forward. And then for me with the Bengals, like they're playing a 4th place schedule. That is a huge advantage to a team that still has a lot of talent. I think that they've corrected some of the issues that they have on the defense. They brought in Geno Stone. They brought in another safety that I can't remember his name, but used to be on the team and is now back on the team. I do think that will help. They lost Cam Sample at kind of their Mike Dana type of edge rusher, but I like some of the things that they've done offensively. I think Chase Brown's going to be great. I think Jermaine Burton could be an impact player. Andre Yosevis, the wide receiver from Princeton, is also taking a step forward. I don't think that they're going to have a hard time replacing Tyler Boyd. They still have T. Higgins. They still have Jamar Chase. And yeah, that's where I sit right now with the AFC North. Any issues?
Yeah, I see the Ravens winning it. Partially, and I know it's kind of a very sensitive topic since it just happened today, or I think it might have been yesterday, but their offensive line coach, Joe something or other, I can't remember what his last name was. He passed away. That type of stuff inspires teams. And we can talk, this show is called The Intangibles for a reason. There's something not tangible about the inspiration that something like that can happen, or that something like that can give a team, especially this early in the preseason. That's a guy that's been in the NFL for 30 years. He's been a part of a lot of different campaigns, different coaching staffs. He's seen a lot. He's been there a lot. He was a foundational piece of the organization. And having him pass is, to me, that's just that little X factor. I really, really, really wanted to put the Bengals. I have a lot of respect for Joe Burrow. I have a lot of respect for that offense. But there's something sexy about Derrick Henry on the Ravens that I just can't. I know it shouldn't make any sense. It's kind of the typical take for an all-star running back to go to a run-heavy offense and be like, well, they should be the Super Bowl favorites now. It's like, well, I mean, there'll probably be a little bit of fall off, but he's just so good, man. And that offensive line, like there might be some issues, but I can't bet against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the same offense. I can't do it.
Derrick Henry's going to hit 2,000 or 2,100 rush attempts this season.
Yep.
That's the thing that concerns me. Also, Bobby Witt Jr., home run, top of the 8th. Kansas City's other MVP, hopefully soon. All-star, just dude's a stud. Just wanted to provide a valuable update from the chat. So it'll be interesting. I just think the Ravens, there's a lot of pieces they've got to replace. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. They've also been a team that struggled with injuries. Be interesting. Maybe Zay Flowers takes the next step. That's the other spot I'm worried about, the wide receiver core. But again, I still have both teams making the playoffs. All right, let's skedaddle on to the East. I've got it going Bills, Dolphins, Jets, Patriots. I have the Bills and Dolphins both making the playoffs. Look, man, you can't catch me picking Tua Tagovailoa to win a division. I've been reviewing a lot of Dolphins film for another gig that I have where I chart and collect data for an analytics site. And let me tell you, we've been watching lots of Dolphins because of all the motion and stuff they do on their offense. Tua is not the guy. He's not the guy. And I know they just paid him. And I think there's some Alex Smith comparisons there as far as a team that's not had a quarterback for a long time. I loved what they've done with the offense. Like Odell Beckham being the third option there really helps. I really liked that they brought in Jalen Wright. They still have Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert. They tripled down on the speed at the running back position, and they brought in Malik Washington, who I think will be the wide receiver 3 by the time it's over out there. I liked Patrick Paul. I like that pick. I think that's some nice depth that they need along the offensive line too. They've got to get those edge rushers healthy, but I just can't see them going and winning games in Buffalo and New York late in the season to win that division. And yeah, with the Bills, I'm just going to bet on the second best quarterback in the NFL. I know that they lost Matt Milano, but I feel pretty good about them kind of replacing what they have with the aggregate. they leaned so heavily into that run offense late in the year. I went back and watched that Chiefs-Bills game in the playoffs. Man, they are hard to stop when they can run the ball like that. So big Khalil Shakir season on tap. I have him in the Arrowhead Addict Fantasy League. Fingers crossed for that. And we'll just like Keon Coleman. He can catch like 2 passes. That's fine. Like just so we can further the worthy over Coleman narrative. But that's how I have that league or that division.
Letting your fantasy football dictate your opinions is a little wild. The Bills at the one spot.
I did not like Keon Coleman. I didn't like him, period. Not a separator. Most of the advanced analytics didn't like him. Ran about 4 routes at Florida State and like has this moniker of being a highlight reel contested catch guy. But if you actually look at the numbers, he kind of sucked at it. So I actually was not a Keon Coleman guy.
Yeah, you're arguing against yourself right now, dude. How are the Bills going to get the 1 spot?
Because I think with Josh Allen being a running moose, James Cook as the running back, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Khalil Shakir, I think that's enough infrastructure for him to just do it in the aggregate there. And, that's basically what they were last year. Like Stephon Diggs was there and helped them win a lot of games, but like for them to really pull themselves up by their bootstraps and make it to the playoffs, which at one time it didn't look like they were going to do. Diggs wasn't a part of that run. Like he was dreadful in the second half of the year. So they basically already did it without him. I think that they're going to get a better version of Dalton Kincaid this year. I think the offensive line is an area for concern. They've got a new center. Mitch Morse is gone, but I think they're going to get more out of Osiris Torres next year. It'll be interesting. I don't know. I guess the one thing you could say is like, oh, well, why don't you have the Jets up there? I can't bring myself to get on board with the Nate Hackett, Aaron Rodgers show. Like the defense has been really good for the last couple of years. They might take a slight step back this year. They don't have near the dominant defensive line that they've had over the last couple of years. Hassan Reddick, like, is he coming? They don't have Bryce Huff anymore. It'll be interesting to see. So I don't know. That's just the way I'm going to lean. I'm going to have to like see it one time from the Dolphins or the Jets to believe that they can beat the Bills.
See, and I just like the timing of the Bills or the Dolphins offense. I understand that they're not a fantastic playoff team, but we're talking about the regular season, right? I've never picked them to go to the Super Bowl, but they are the ones that I have winning the NFC or the AFC East, followed by the Jets, who also make the playoffs, then the Bills and the Patriots. Patriots are going to suck. We all know that. Bills, I'm just not confident. There's just so much that happened with this team over the offseason. We know for a fact that Josh Allen is not Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes is what he did last year was special. And to be able to pull together a team that had that many deficiencies on offense, I don't think he can do. I don't think Josh Allen can do. So Tua Tagovailoa, I'm not your number 1 fan, but I think he can get it done in the regular season. And I think he's proven that.
I will give like a 15% chance to Bills implosion. Like they're replacing so much injuries. I think that like it's very easy to say that their head coach is coaching for his job this year if things don't go well. I could see it. I could see it in the sense of like kind of like how the Eagles collapsed a little bit last year, where like the vibes are just so off. So I could see it. I ultimately think that like Josh Allen's just too good to let that happen. But it'll be interesting to see. All right, let's head over to the South real quick. This is like my one spicy take here. I have the Jags winning this division. Everyone and their brother is on the Texans. This is a classic like arc that you see in sports a lot of times. Come up team. They're surprised. They're the new hot team. Everyone, then the next year they make a bunch of moves. Everyone's all in on them. They have expectations now, and they take a step back. Then the following year, that third year is when they really take the step forward. Like I think about the Astros, the year that they pushed the Royals in the playoffs in the 2015 playoffs. Then they come back, they miss the playoffs altogether. Boom, then they're in the World Series. To me, everyone and their brother was on the Jaguars last year. The Jags had a lot of injuries along the offensive line. They had a lot of 50-50 plays not go their way. Their defensive coordinator, I think, left some room to be desired. I've liked some of the moves that they've made this year. They've locked up their guys. They brought in a new, more aggressive defensive coordinator who's going to use players like Trayvon Walker on the inside instead of just like rushing him from the edge, which I think will be a nice added bonus. I like some of the moves that they've made. And I also think that, again, the expectations are now on the Texans. They're the flashy team. They're the one that everyone loves. CJ Stroud's this media star. And by the way, like CJ Stroud, I'm so close to calling him a top 5 quarterback. The only reason why I'm not going to is because I need to see it for one more year. Like I did this with Jalen Hurts. Everyone last year, Jalen Hurts, top 5 quarterback. Did you see the Super Bowl? He was better than Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. Blah, blah, blah. And then the next year happens and defenses get a chance to adjust. I want to see it for one more year before I put CJ Stroud there. I think both teams are playoff teams. I've really liked what I've seen from CJ Stroud, even in the preseason, having Tank Dell back, having Nico Collins, adding Stephon Diggs. They're loaded. They're a wagon. But I think that this could be the year that the Jags finally take a little bit more of a step forward. So I'm going to give them the slight edge.
You're putting a lot of faith in Jags GM Trent Baalke, and that's something that I am not comfortable doing. I don't know if you guys have any Jags fans that are in your life, you'll know that the GMing that Trent Baalke has done over the past couple of years has been atrocious.
The draft
picks have been insane. Yeah. I mean, I know everybody doesn't have the same board, but whatever board Trent Baalke's drafting off of is clearly not the same as anybody in the rest of the leagues. So I have them at the 2 spot, and I'm putting my faith in Trevor Lawrence. Texans, though, dude, like I have trouble getting out of the sensationalism that are like these up and coming teams. Like the Falcons, you'll see on the NFC side, they're not in an insane division by any means, but like I have them rated very highly. I'm not certain you can build a team by just adding a bunch of like superstar players through like free agency. I mean, there's a reason these teams are letting them go, but like there's something about the Texans adding Stephon Diggs, doing incredibly well in the draft, and then also being good last year, where it's like, well, I mean, CJ Stroud, like you're telling me he's not. I'm firmly committed to being able to put him in the top 5 quarterbacks at this point.
Yeah, I like I said, I just think I would like to see it. Like that's my kind of rules that like to put someone in that top 5 thing, I need to see it year over year.
Oh yeah, no, that's a safe take. And
yeah.
I think that's really smart, especially for quarterbacks who, have like a specific niche, like people like Brock Purdy or Tua Tagovailoa. At one point, people were talking about top 5, but it's like, give it a year, see what happens. Just the arm talent is crazy. I can't quit it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I have rounding out that division. I have the Colts and Titans. Like, fire off a hot take about the Titans. Like, they're either making the playoffs or being awful. Too many veterans. Like teams like that. If the vibes are bad and things aren't going well, like that team will roll over and die because everyone's getting paid. They've already been taken care of. Like, let's book the cruise to Jamaica. Like, that's the vibes that are going to be around there in November and December. Finally, our AFC West. To no surprise of anybody, I've got the Chiefs winning. Another spicy hot take I think the Broncos will actually be decent this year. Not great, but like, kind of like what they were last year, like 9-8, 8-9. My thought process here is like they were challenging for the playoffs last year until they basically decided to bench Russell Wilson because they knew they were going to move on from that contract. Bo Nix can throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage. We know that, so he can do that for them. I do think that they are a well-coached team. I really don't love a lot of the roster construction there. But to me, they've shown enough that they can just kind of be frisky, run the ball, play moderate defense. I think that what they were towards the latter part of the year was more of what they were than that Dolphins game that everyone's made such a big deal about. Raiders, 3rd, Chargers, 4th. Chargers, it is strictly a roster thing. That roster is super depleted of talent. I think that they'll be scrappy. I think that, they'll play a lot of close games, but I think in the end that talent's just going to lose out. And my thing about the Raiders is I'm very out on interim head coaches. I'm out on Antonio Pierce. I didn't really love the offensive coordinator hire. I think that's a team that is just like head together with like gum and toothpicks, where it's like, oh, like let's just put Devontae Adams in there. Hey, let's add another like top 35 pick tight end, and then like I don't know. I think the defensive line is going to be hell on wheels, but I just wonder about how that all is going to work without a quarterback.
Yeah, I was really happy that you put the Broncos 2nd place, and we kind of saw it last year with awful quarterback play. They were still a relatively good team. Like there was a point in time during last season where it was like, oh man, are the Broncos going to beat the Chiefs out for the AFC West? Obviously, everybody inside of Kansas City was screaming, are you mentally deficient? What's your IQ? To all the people that were saying that, but it's like they were still a really good team. And I think that Russell Wilson might have been a cancer in that locker room. So replacing him with a younger kid, not that much younger. Bo Nix is still insanely old for a prospect, but like bringing somebody in like fresh blood, revamp, like the vibes are going to be immaculate there. Other than that, I have Chargers and then Broncos. So Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, and then Raiders, excuse me. I got to give the nod to Jim Harbaugh. Like he's been an insane coach at Michigan, completely revamped. I think he has a clear vision of what he's going to do. I don't know if the Raiders have that. there's something to be said about plotting a point on a map and traveling straight there rather than being like, I'm heading west and we'll see where I end up. Like the Raiders seem very much like a team without a destiny, and the Chargers clearly prioritize the running portion of their offense, getting their book and tackles, still getting like a relatively good prospect in Ladd McConkey at wide receiver. Again, the talent is going to be the only thing that kind of, hamstrings them, if anything does during this season. I could easily see them. They're definitely a team that like I could see being second or being last, really depending on like how the coaching translates from college to the NFL.
Yeah, and like if you told me that the Raiders' big plan is to be the most appealing team to Dak Prescott next year when he's a free agent, that would like make so much more sense than like what the plan is right now, which is like, hey, what if we just like try to build everything around literally like a bottom 5 starting quarterback room in the NFL, which is kind of what they're doing right now, which is like, there's something to be said for talent elevating quarterback play, but the quarterback play has to be at a certain level, right? And I don't see it. It confuses me, and maybe that is the plan. It's like, let's just be the most appealing Dak Prescott landing spot next year, in which case Dak Prescott could be pretty salty with that offense, with those weapons, but that's still a year away and still has to happen, right? All right, let's jump over to the NFC. We'll zip through this. NFC North, Packers making the playoffs. Packers winning the division as well. Lions in second. Bears, Vikings. My thing with the Packers is that like I think those last 8 games from Jordan Love, I think that's a sign of what's to come here. I love how multiple that offense is. I think Matt LaFleur is a super underrated coach. They finally have a real defensive coordinator out there. Tons of defensive talent out there. I think that you're going to see breakout years from Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, some of those like first round picks they have on the defense. Really like that. They added the safety talent that they really lacked last year. I'm expecting much better things from that defense. To me, this smells a lot like 2019 Chiefs. You've got a team that's got
no. I can't let that slide, dude. That's wild. 2019 Chiefs?
Yeah.
Jordan Love at quarterback.
I think you have a real, like, true or false, Jordan Love's really talented. True, right? Like push, true. Like push. He really showed a lot this last offseason or this season. And I think like growing into his role as a starter, you've got a lot of emerging skill players that are multiple. You have an offensive minded head coach who has a scheme advantage. You've got a defense that's got a lot of talent on it that now has a real defensive coordinator who's had success. I'm very bullish on the Packers. I think that they've got a tough path with the 49ers. That's been a burr in their saddle for a long time. But I think, a lot of people will pick the Lions to win that division. But I see a lot of those elements into this team. And the only thing I'll say that like I don't really love is I wish that they just had one more, like a true alpha on offense, a Travis Kelce, a Tyreek Hill. But I don't know. I'm in on the Packers. I still have the Lions making the playoffs. I just think that they take a slight step back from last year. I think most of that is more schedule driven probably than anything, playing a first place schedule instead of the schedule they played this previous year. Still think they'll be a good team.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you this, like the difference between the Lions and the Packers is probably not as big as the difference between the Chiefs and the Broncos, right? Like, so we're kind of nitpicking here. But I just don't see. I have the Packers missing the playoffs. Lions first, then Bears, then Packers, then Vikings. Jordan Love is talented. We talked about CJ Stroud and like having trouble anointing him a top 5 quarterback. I just don't see how you can look at the Packers and look at the Texans and be like, hey, these two teams are completely different. And the difference is a head coach and an offensive coordinator. Like, I look at those teams and I go, okay, well, if I'm giving the edge to any team, it's going to be the team with the better quarterback. And so, again, different conferences. So the AFC South is going to be a little bit easier to win than the NFC North is this year. But like, if you're comparing the two teams, they're got to be close. And I think that the Texans are probably going to win out there. Now, you look at the Lions, I think that they are like literally the team to beat in the NFC this year. They are an incredibly well led team. They have a really good structure up top. The Bears are just the sexy pick. I love seeing the Bears like actually do well. They're my NFC team. They have been for a really long time. So a little bias might have entered into this this decision, but like, dude, Caleb Williams, he's looked fantastic in the preseason. Not expecting him to go to the Super Bowl, but like, be better than 7 wins and you'll be fine. They'll be really good.
Yeah, Bears, similar vibes. Again, I know you just took issue with this, but like eerily remind me a little bit of 2018 Chiefs, where it's like you got a quarterback that's got a lot of talent, an offense with a ton of talent. Defense still needs a lot of work. And I think the defensive line, I think they'll be an all-in team next offseason, like, making big moves, big trades, those type of things, kind of like the Texans were this year. I could see them being like a salty, like 9-8, 10-7. Sorry, the record thing still messes with me. I keep on saying 10-6, but yeah, I think that they'll be plucky. I have them missing the playoffs, but just barely. Okay, moving on to the NFC East. I have it going Eagles, Cowboys, Commanders, Giants. My other little spicy take: Cowboys miss the playoffs. I just think that they've got a lame duck head coach there. I think that team is even more star heavy than it's been in years past, where they're just relying on a couple of guys. You've got Micah Parsons, who CeeDee Lamb just re-upped today. So, good news for him. Still got Micah Parsons, who needs a new deal. Deron Bland is already going to miss some time with an injury. You've got Diggs coming off, Trayvon Diggs, that is, coming off a season-ending injury that he's working his way back. I just think that this team is a team that if things start going in a certain direction, you got a quarterback who's not like long-term on the team, the vibes could be bad. And also, I think they have really kind of tapped out the last couple of years at 12 wins every year. I think the Eagles will be better. I think that conference is getting a little bit better too. So I've got them missing again, just barely. I think there's them and the Bears are the first teams out, is how I'm going to have it. And the Eagles, I've really loved a lot of moves that they made. They made that Jahan Dotson move. They've really needed a wide receiver 3, adding Saquon Barkley. I think the offensive line, that's the biggest concern I have from year to year. Like they quietly lost quite a bit there. They brought back Landon Dickerson, but they're replacing Jason Kelsey. Isaac Salamalu is not there. They've got an older Lane Johnson at right tackle, still great. Mailata is going to be solid there. And then the defense, like they added Devin White. They're doing this change again at the defensive coordinator spot. It'll be interesting to see how this goes. There's not been tons of great feedback about the defensive coordinator. Like, he just left the Dolphins, now he's with the Eagles. Be interesting to see how that all goes, but I really, really love their draft, as almost all of us always do. So I've got the Eagles taking the advantage there. Like, but seriously, the whole season could pivot on if they can still do the tush push. I need to see it, man. I need to see what it looks like with Juergens at center instead of Kelsey, because I really think that was a Jason Kelsey play. Be interesting to see. If they can still do the tush push, I'm all in. If the tush push is like drop into, like, how they call themselves, like the 93%ers or whatever, the Kelsey podcast, if it's like the 73%ers, I'm out.
Yeah, no. See, this is a really interesting division in the NFC. I have the Cowboys winning. I could absolutely see how the Eagles could pull that off with all the moves they've made this offseason. But like, there's something about the Cowboys and like putting it all on the line. Jerry Jones was very vocal about, being all in on this season. That doesn't necessarily mean what everyone took it to mean, but I mean, Dak Prescott is playing for a job. I think he'll get one no matter what, but I think that the range of money that he will receive in this upcoming offseason is going to depend on how well he does in the postseason of this 2024-2025 season. So Cowboys doing well. I think the players love Dak. I think that there's going to be some motivation to do a little bit better than they have in the past in the postseason. And I just don't like the Eagles, dude. They're just, the vibes are off. There's clearly something going on between their head coach and their quarterback, which, if you know anything about football, is like the one thing you can't have happen. The quarterback is the intermedium between the the head coach and the rest of the team. If something's,
I can't remember who said it, but there was a report that like they can't be in the same room alone together. Again, like if we're on the scale here of like ceiling floor, they have a really low floor, because we saw it last year. Like, literally could not beat almost anybody towards the end of the season last year because of the vibe. So yeah, you've got a good point there. I'm just betting on the sheer amount of talent that's on this roster.
Yeah, which is a reasonable take to have. I don't think anybody's going to trash a take based exclusively on the Eagles' talent. They are so talented. But again, the vibes are just off for me. I can't do it.
All right, because we have to, NFC South. I think we both have the Falcons winning this division. Yeah, I've got to go in Falcons, Buccaneers, Saints, Panthers because I guess it just has to happen a certain way. Yeah, like the Falcons are definitely clearing away the best team. They just re-upped AJ Terrell. They brought in Justin Simmons and Matthew Judon. I thought that helped raise the floor of that defense, which really kind of needed some help here. So interested to see what happens with Michael Penix long term with the Kirk Cousins thing. Like, why was Michael Penix not playing in the preseason games? I'm not sure. It's still a heck of a gamble to like bet on an aging quarterback coming off an ACL injury or Achilles injury, but there's a lot of talent on that roster. Huge Bijan Robinson fan. Like, grab him in your fantasy drafts as you can. I think he's going to have a huge season, but I've got it. The Falcons are the only team making the playoffs in that division.
Yeah, and I agree. Falcons are just the only team. I have them going really, really far too. I have them make it to the conference championship game. I'm not sure that you can build an entire team in an offseason, but if you're looking at the pieces and you're looking at how poorly a job Arthur Smith did last year with the offense, it's like if any team has the ability to just like have every reason to succeed and to move forward and play incredibly well, it's the Falcons. Like, I love Kirk Cousins. Kyle Pitts has been a fantasy like dream of mine for I don't know how long. I just always expect for him to do well. Bijan is insane. Tyler Algier, another great player. Like, they have all the pieces. Can they put it together and like legitimately make a run? I think so.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Last division, NFC West. I went a little spicy here because, I mean, guys, like, it's just never chalk, right? I've got the Rams winning the division. I have the 49ers making the playoffs as well. I'm a huge Matt Stafford guy. I'm a huge Sean McVay guy. I've really liked what they've done, beefing up that offensive line. It just needs to get healthy. I think, bringing in Kyron Williams has been a huge addition to the offense. I like the depth that they've added. I think the defense, obviously replacing Aaron Donald is going to be huge. And that's a big question. But I think that they have just enough with the 49ers to get past them. I think like it's a really tight, like maybe it comes down to a tiebreaker type of thing. The 49ers, I'm just a little concerned about the vibes. With losing the Super Bowl, the Brandon Ayuk stuff. Trent Williams has not been, almost at training camp at all. I think they had a home run of a draft. I really love their draft. Dominic Pooney is going to be awesome. Royals win, by the way. Club dub. Welcome. Royals win.
Hey, there we go.
There we go. 4-3. Yeah, it'll be. I think the 49ers are still a great team and a Super Bowl contender. I'm going to give the nod to the Rams this time, though.
Yeah, I could see it. I have three teams making the playoffs. Making the playoffs in the West. The 49ers, Rams, Seahawks. I think all of them have a shot to go to the playoffs. My one issue is that the 49ers, there's like this Super Bowl drop off where if you lose the Super Bowl, you're kind of down for a few years and then you come back. We kind of saw that with the Chiefs after they lost to the Buccaneers. They didn't even make the Super Bowl the year after, but then came back. Like, this could absolutely be one of the seasons where the 49ers just kind of go, hey, listen, dude, that was the best team we've ever had playing against the Chiefs, and we still couldn't win. And that's probably the worst version of the Chiefs that we've ever played. Something's not working. I don't know if it's the head coach. I don't know if it's like somebody on the defensive line that maybe isn't as good as a lot of people think he is. Like, I think that there could be some infighting and like decisions like, can we really do this with the talent that we have? But I just can't quit. I cannot quit that team. They're so good. They always are talented. They have a great head coach. The quarterback is finally at least competent out. And it's, they got rid of Trey Lance. Jimmy Garoppolo's off the roster. Like, this is a team that has the legs to go forward. We just got to see it. I don't think they're going to make the conference game, but like, you can't write them off as being like a team that's going to straight miss the playoffs. They're going to play a part in the NFC playoffs. It's just to what extent.
Okay, real quick. Who do you have making the NFC championship game, excuse me?
Lions and Falcons, excuse me.
And your AFC championship game?
Chiefs, Bengals.
Ooh.
I know.
I hate to hear it. Your Super Bowl is who?
Chiefs and Lions, and the Chiefs win.
Attaboy. Way to podcast.
I have to be a homer, dude.
Hey,
it's a Chiefs podcast, man.
You know what? Like, you would be correct. Like if you've been predicting the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl and win it, like you've been correct the last 5 years.
Statistically speaking, yeah.
This is-
Yeah, it's a good bet.
Yeah. AFC Championship game for me is Chiefs over Texans. So I've got the Texans coming in as a wild card. So there's my respect to CJ Stroud and the quality of that roster. My NFC Championship game is Packers 49ers. The Packers, they finally get the monkey off their back. They go to the Super Bowl to face the Chiefs, a rematch of Super Bowl I. But don't worry, I still have our Chiefies winning 3P. Travis and Kelsey, Travis and Taylor, they're right off in the sunset. Everyone complains about the refs. It's a masterclass. Like the Chiefs,
classic Chiefs Super Bowl.
Yeah, Chiefs go down 13 at halftime instead of 10 this time. It'll be glorious. Chiefs over Packers. So that's where we have it. So there's the answer key to the NFL offseason. Sorry, the script was leaked early, but you can still watch and play fantasy and stuff to keep it interesting. But real quick, speaking of like the season starting, we want to get into some prospects to watch. College football, it starts this week. I'm so excited. I'm trying to decide what meat I'm going to smoke, how much buffalo chicken dip I'm going to consume over the weekend with this great slate of college football games. So we took the 4 best games on the college football slate, picked a couple of prospects that make sense for the Chiefs. Here at Arrowhead Addict, all of our draft coverage, it's tailored towards the Chiefs. So you're not going to hear us talking about quarterbacks. We're not going to be talking about centers. We just locked in Creed Humphrey in a big extension. We don't need to be talking centers. So real quick, the 4 games that we're going to be highlighting, you can watch these guys as you're playing. We're going to lean towards the local teams as well. Christian demanded that I give him Mizzou. So we've got Mizzou, Murray State, and that barn burner. I'm going to be talking about Georgia and Clemson. Then Christian's going to talk about USC, LSU, another great game on the schedule. Then we're going to round it out with Notre Dame, Texas A&M. So we've got 3 2-ranked opponents, and then Mizzou, Missouri State. So, Christian, tell me about a man named Luther Burden.
Dude, he's the guy. What do you think? I think he's probably the best prospect coming up in the draft. Places like NFL Draft Buzz have him at number 1, so that's not an unfounded take.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm about to put out my top 25. He's a top 5 player for me.
Yeah.
I just, I think I have him over McMillan, the Toretto McCullen, the wide receiver from Arizona. Like when I look at Luther Burden, when I see like his 100% outcome, I see Jamar Chase. Like that's what I see. Like the body size, the body control, the down the field tracking, the agility, the yak ability. I just want to see one more year down the field route running, because year 1 was a lot of manufactured like yak and that type of stuff, which part of that might have been Brady Cook. Anyways, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're good, dude. Keep going, man. No, he has good contact balance too, which is something that I was really surprised to see. When you think of a yak receiver, you think of somebody like Kadarius Toney or Rashee Rice, who's like maybe a little bit slighter, not the strongest guy in the building, but Luther Burden's like 5'11", 205. Insanely athletic, insanely fast. He's do it all. Like, again, he's going to need to see some different route changes, see him do a little bit more to be like a legit Jamar Chase comp. But like, that's the guy. He's the guy. So if you've been living under a rock, his number's number 3 when you're watching the game. He's going to probably have 250 yards against Murray State. It's going to be incredibly fun to watch. My next guy that I have is Theo Weiss Jr. He's number 1. He's kind of like, I don't want to say the opposite because he's still really good. He's just a completely different type of player. Like he's 6'2", 205. He was a 5-star recruit. He played at Oklahoma. He's a big, like, I don't want to say burly because he's not really, thick at 6'2", but he's like an X receiver. He's like your Justin Ross if Justin Ross hit the hype. Like he's that type of player. He's got those athletic traits, great hands, great contact balance. Like he's another one of those guys that I could see being like what MVS could have been if he was a legit, like could catch the football when we needed him to and made smart plays. But he's almost a little bit less athletic. So if I was going to comp him, it would just be like MVS with good hands, a little bit slower.
To me, he reminds me a lot of the draft profile of Jalen Polk from last year.
Yes. Yeah.
Bigger body guy, really good at high pointing the ball. An X receiver traditionally doesn't wow you with athleticism, but modest ball tracking. But like can run real routes. That's what he kind of reminds me of a little bit. And yeah, like them returning both of those guys for Mizzou, I think that is going to be one of the better wide receiver cores in the NFL, or not in the NFL, in college football this year. So yeah, it's exciting. I think I definitely think Luther Burden has a chance to be the first wide receiver off the board. It's just going to come down to how does he finish off the season. I thought bringing Brady Cook back was huge for them too. And yeah, like Murray State, count your days, right? Like this is
we're coming for you, dude.
Yeah, this is the classic week 1 feel good game. But hey, like every team does it almost. But one team that is not doing it is Georgia and Clemson. We've got some prospects here that I'm really excited to talk about. Let's talk about linebacker Jalen Walker for the Georgia Bulldogs. He's 6'2", 245 pounds. I'm getting goosebumps talking about the draft here. A former 5-star recruit, Walker was one of the highest rated defensive players in the 2022 recruiting class. He's a pretty green prospect. Like, he hasn't played a ton. If you asked him, he would describe his position as an HLB, as a hybrid linebacker. There's a couple of guys who are coming on the draft this year that are just athletics balls of clay that they're not a true edge rusher. They're not a true off the ball linebacker. You're going to want to say Micah Parsons when you watch him. I think that he's too small at this point to be a Micah Parsons like comparison, but that's what some people will do. To me, has some shades of like Willie Gay and what he could do. Willie Gay was much bigger than him, but what I like about Jalen Walker is that he can play off the ball. And I think that is where he's going to be most successful at the NFL level. He's pretty solid in coverage. I think with a big year this year, he could be a first-round linebacker. He has all the traits, all the skills. He just needs more playing time. He's kind of been hidden in what is always a deep Georgia Bulldog defense. Be interesting to see him get more run. This is not a guy for the Chiefs because I think the Chiefs just grabbed another starting safety, but you want to watch Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, probably going to be a first-round pick, like probably might be the highest pick safety since Derwin James, honestly. It would have been absolutely insane if Georgia would have gotten Caleb Downs. He ended up going to Ohio State, but he was one of the top recruits in his class. That would have been like the best safety room ever. But watch Malachi Starks. This guy just flies to the ball, can line up anywhere on the field, a true chess piece. And then the other guy that I want to bring up, this is on the Clemson side here. This guy was actually in my 3-round mock, which went up last week. This is DeMonte Capehart. He's a mountain of a man, force to be reckoned with. He is an early down player. This is not a 3-down defensive lineman. He's an interior defensive lineman. He's 6'4", 320 pounds. He was a top 50 recruit from the prestigious IMG Academy in 2019. His role, it's been very clear. It's stop the run. He does not play a ton of snaps. Last year, I think he only played about 250 snaps. Even in those snaps, he's credited with 10 defensive stops, 12 pressures, and a sack. Dabo Swinney, he likes to rotate his defensive line a lot. So I think, an increased role for him would be really nice to see. I think that he's going to be a high day 3 pick or a late day 2 guy. Kind of depends on how the season goes. One thing with him, there is a little bit of off the field question. He had a weapons charge that happened on campus with campus police. Those charges were eventually dropped. But I mean, like, hey, legal trouble, like this guy's definitely a Chief, right? It'd be interesting to see, but he's a run stuffer. The Chiefs, they've been trying to find an answer for that position for a while, right? They've done Keandre Coburn, like they just keep going back to this Derek Nottie. Well, let's get a real run stuffer, a true 2-gapping guy who can just like eat blocks. So that's what DeMonte Capehart, interior defensive lineman for Clemson, brings.
Yeah, and there's one guy you mentioned that I really want to talk about, Jalen Walker. Dude, like that is one of the guys that you think of like situational pass rusher. You think of somebody who can play multiple positions in the Spags defense. Like him dropping back into coverage, I feel a lot better about than a guy like Felix Anudike-Uzomah, where it's like,
there's a lot of guys,
athleticism, really agile. Go ahead.
There's a lot of guys that are in this role, right? Like this kind of like Dorian O'Daniel was when he was his time here in Kansas City, like just kind of ahead of his time where it's like, well, he could play safety, he could be a linebacker, he could be an edge rusher, like kind of just like this true like hybrid defender thing. I think it's something that NFL defenses are going to have to get more creative at using. Kyle Hamilton's kind of the opposite, where he's like this really big slot guy. James Pierce from Tennessee, he's another guy. I think James Pierce, I can't remember. I'm still early, but I think he's another one of those guys that's kind of like that, where like he just has to line up all over the place and can kind of do all sorts of things. So those are my guys from those games. Who do you got for our next game? USC LSU.
So I'll talk about another guy that's kind of like that in that same vein, just a different kind of tweener. So like it's Harold Perkins Jr., linebacker number 4 for LSU, 6'1", 220. This is a hyper athletic linebacker. This is a coverage guy that can give you kind of that like, oh, excuse me. Who's the guy we just drafted? Hicks, safety. He's that type of player where it's like, could he play linebacker, like a sub linebacker role in the Spags defense? Absolutely. Could he be like the Drew Tranquil replacement that we have come in and be like that middle linebacker? Yes, he absolutely could. He's very, very intelligent. He's very highly touted by the other teammates that he has on LSU. Like, this is a guy who brings the competition, is a leader in the locker room, and fits perfectly in the Spags defense. He's probably going to be like a day 2 pick, maybe day 1, depending on like how some teams view him, if they think he can fit his system or not. But like, he's a really good player. Then the other 2 that I have that I really, really want to harp on is Will Campbell, the offensive tackle, number 66 LSU, and then Emory Jones Jr., the other offensive tackle for number 50. Dude, those guys are so good. They'll both be top 50 picks in the 25 draft. Like, I could easily see
top 32.
Yes,
sure.
yes, they could both go first round. They're both 6'6", 320 pounds. Will has a little bit more upside. I feel like he's a little bit more well-rounded player. I think of him as kind of like a more physical Eric Fisher. Like, he has that athleticism that you look for in like a zone blocking left tackle. But he's really good with his hands. Really
so fluid. So fluid.
Yes,
like when
so
you watch,
fluid.
If you were looking at any of the LSU receivers this year or Jaden Daniels, he jumped out at how fluid he was. And it also like shocks me. You watch him in his pass sets, and you're like, oh, this guy's a waist bender. Like, he's too high. But he just has such great recovery skills and mirroring skills. It's special. It's really exciting. Both guys I would love to have in Kansas City. I think they might both be off the board by the time the Chiefs are picking.
Oh yeah. But the one thing about Emory that I wanted to at least highlight before we get into it, he's like more of a Trey Smith type of player where
power.
Yes, power. If you look at his highlight reel, it is pancake after pancake. He's got more pancakes than IHOP. Like, he is a legit, athletic, aggressive player that, I mean, again, if he could turn out like Trey Smith, that'd be amazing. We put him at the right tackle. Like, I think we have our left tackle.
I think given his draft stock, like, he will get the chance to play tackle, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being a kick-ass guard at the next level.
Yes.
It wouldn't, kind of like Dominic Pooney a little bit. The arm length is like obviously going to be big there as it is with all tackles, but Dominic Pooney was a guy that played tackle at Kansas, and he's going to be an ass kicker for the 49ers. Like, I'm so excited to watch what he does in that scheme that really helps out offensive lineman anyway in the outside zone. It's gonna be cool. Some dudes in that game for sure. And that's not even getting to like what USC has. All right, I'm gonna get to my other game here. This is USC, or not USC, sorry, that's your game. Texas A&M and Notre Dame. Here's a guy that, boy, I tell you what, please be there at pick 32. Nick Scorton. He's an edge rusher from Purdue that is now with Texas A&M. He is 6'4", 280 pounds, former teammate of George Karlaftis, and it's a good thing because this guy's got a hell of a bull rush and a great spin move. He is the only edge rusher in the Big Ten last year to have double-digit sacks, has winning reps against like NFL starting tackles like DeJuan Jones. He's got that signature spin move, and he's a snap-eating monster, just like George Karlaftis. This guy doesn't come off the field, and he plays solid run defense. This guy develops another pass rush move besides that spin and the power. He's going to be a top 15 pick. I really enjoyed my evaluation of him. He's a guy that, like, you just watch him, you're like, this is Karlaftis. This looks a lot like George Karlaftis, except he has more like production. And like, you know, like I said, they had a little bit of overlap at Purdue. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in this A&M defense. He was one of the biggest like transfer portal guys this season. Huge like gem for Texas A&M to land. Super excited to see. This guy feels like a Spags type of guy.
Oh,
he's got the size.
He's going to be so many players or so many people's like draft crushes. When it comes to draft time, that this Nick Scranton is going to be a name that you see a bunch. He's going to be mocked every single time to the Chiefs. Just an absolute monster.
And it's the motor, too. Like that's why a lot of guys are going to like him. It's the motor. On the Notre Dame side, I've got Benjamin Morrison. He's a cornerback, 6 foot, 186 pounds. This is a physical press main corner, but he's a lot more than just strength. You think about guys like L'Jarius Sneed, who we just watched, press Tyreek Hill into the earth. That's not so much why he's a press guy. It's more of a technique thing. He is a true technician at the position, but he's got the necessary athleticism to stick with those smaller, fast receivers. And he's got the technique that he can run with those bigger bodied guys. Something I found interesting about him doing my evaluation, he is one of 5 Division I athletes of his siblings. So all of his siblings, all 5 of them are Division I athletes. Really cool. He was an All-American as a freshman. He is for sure an outside corner. Really enjoyed what I saw from him. Just technique. This is a guy that you put on the outside and you plan on him starting for the next 4 years for you. And then I always like to shout out the quarterbacks just in case that obviously is like one of the biggest parts of the draft. Connor Wigman, the Texas A&M quarterback. Could be a day one guy, might be a day two guys. I'm not sure. Big season for him. Maybe we're talking about day one for him, but those are my guys for there. So got a guy on the defensive side for both teams.
Yeah. One more guy I would like to shout out is Bear Alexander from USC. Like, he's a true nose tackle, number 90. He is the type of guy that you could replace Noddy with, but he is like so aggressive. He's another aggressive technician type of player. Could fit perfectly in our defense.
Real quick, the chat had a good question that I kind of want to bring up real quick, and then we can get out of here. Do you think the Chiefs use both of their third-round picks next year, like the Titans and their pick?
What do you mean? Like we traded away?
Yeah. Do we keep both picks and make them, you think?
Spags loves to give away those third rounders, man. I could really see us making a move for somebody like towards the trade deadline, but there's nobody out there right now that I would legitimately consider for a third round pick that has been, in the news.
Man, I feel like the Chiefs would be more likely to move their pick rather than the Titans pick, because I'm really hoping that Titans pick is like 70s. Like that could be really juicy, But
here's the thing is that anytime those negotiations go on, anytime you're
gonna want
trading
the
up,
Titans
they're
pick.
like, we want the higher pick, man. We're not going to take the one that's at 94 or whatever the
Yeah.
hell yours is going to be. So
Yeah. I would really like to see them make both those picks. I think, we were talking about the preseason and lack of depth there. Like the third round, that's a great place to grab another role player, right? Like that could be your starting guard next year, right?
Yeah.
Like you can absolutely draft a starting guard in the top of the third round that replaces Joe Tooney or Trey Smith. So yeah, well, like my arm hairs are like standing up. We're talking draft. Like I smell the buffalo chicken dip, the chili, the smoker. College football is back. Chiefs football is almost back, and you need to stay here at Arrowhead Addict so you can listen to all of our great podcasts. We've got a podcast every day. Become a member. Our fantasy football leagues are up and running. We have great Chiefs conversation. I'm going to be doing a lot of draft talk in there hopefully soon once I learn how to use Discord. But that's another discussion for another day. Christian, it was a pleasure as always. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Richard. And thank you all for listening. Have a great rest of your Monday. And as always, go Chiefs.